countries. We are the only one who has members who share and pray in English, Korean, Polish, Spanish, and Vietnamese. So we really are hoping that we will internalize this theme of one body, and there we go. This logo is noteworthy because you see the letters CVX. The hosting nations were Argentina, Uruguay, and Paraguay, and they were known as Arupa. The bread is little loaves of bread, indicates the gifts that we bring. And the little gourd with the straw is a yerba mate tea, which is something that tastes a little bit like wet hay until you get accustomed to it. Maybe sugar helps, but it's sort of the drink of the South American countries that we're hosting, and Argentina in particular. Being part of a group of 204 people that included 51 Jesuits and 71 countries from around the world was really quite a mind-blowing experience for me. And it really is something I will never, ever forget. This particular presentation are just, like I said, very impressionistic. It'll be quick, but I refer you to Harvest Volume 51, Number 2, where those of us who attended share our impressions, and I'd also encourage you to go to the World site that includes photographs and thoughts and sharing from others from around the world who came. The group that came just had a wonderful opportunity at sharing community, being part of the community, and we worked around the theme of CLC as gift for the church and the world. And we wanted to get to know each other. It's amazing how just coming together, we felt that we have known each other for ages and ages. There was great excitement at the initial meeting. On show of hands confirmed that for the first time, that a majority of the people came for the first time. I would say about nearly 3/4 of the people there were first-time attendees. The presentation of the national communities was, I think, something akin to the beginning of the Olympics, where they have the March of the Nations. And we had, it was just a very festive environment. We saw the various, in color, we saw the various communities that were represented. There was a little profile of each community, such as the one you see here with Korea. Adi and our little group from the United States brought a flag. It was very funny because some of the flags were quite large and stole some of the interest of people and whatever, but we brought the size that was recommended. There were also several national communities incorporated, Vietnam, Latvia, and Mauritius. We, as the USA, were godparenting, who sponsored the acceptance of Vietnam. It was a process that took several years. And we gathered as friends in Christ. We did liturgies together. There were presentations, formal, informal. There was an immersion experience in San Miguel, a barrio, very poor barrio, in the community that the assembly was held. There was a communal discernment process, decisions, elections, and sharing the experience. We were asked to share the experience with our national communities and to really disseminate and get the word out about what we were doing, how we were doing it, and the theme kind of continued, the desiring greater depth and integration in living out our CLC charism in the world today. It echoed Lebanon when Father Nicolas talked about going more deeply, more deeply, more deeply. And that's exactly what we tried to do in at this particular assembly. Develop each dimension of CLC, spirituality, community mission, and care for the charism for us and for others. In my little article in Harvest magazine. I also provide a little context. There was a lot of reading prayer that went on before the meeting, and Project 168 talks about the opportunities that we had because of our 50th anniversary, the papacy of Pope Francis, also the current Pope Francis, stressing the importance of lay involvement. In Project 169, we talked about caring for our gift, offering it generously, and also in April of 2018, just immediately preceding the assembly, President Mauricio Lopez reminded us that this is a very special Kairos moment, and we tried to incorporate all of that, bring these opportunities and the Kairos moment into our deliberations and sharing. Unlike prior assemblies, there was a team that was brought in. Usually EXCO, and I'd not been to World Assemblies, but we were told that this is a little different. We had a professional team that facilitates discernment processes, the spiritual exercises for apostolic discernment in common. And they came and served as facilitators, and we spent 5 days out of the 10-day assembly going through specific exercises several times a day. We had time for personal prayer. We had time for group prayer and sharing 3 times a day. And finally, moving towards a kind of a discernment model. But very quickly, just to go over these things, we had the facilitating team did what they called spiritual conversation, or encouraged spiritual conversation. The idea is that we would take time to pray, share our personal faith experience in a first round of conversation when we got together. Members would listen with an attitude of respect and grateful listening, not discussing yet. After the first round, there was a silence to reflect on the particular feelings, questions, insights that people had. A second round, people shared in what they heard or felt in the first round. And then third round, people tried to name the consensus they heard and offer prayers on what they lived and shared. So we were given a series of prayer exercises, and they dealt with topics such as gifts personally received in CLC. We did a history of CLC, graces received during these days, how we named God. And we also did one called community paralysis, and very, very interesting in terms of what was blocking our movement of grace and striving towards the Majas. We felt that we had received many, many gifts in our journey, and we wanted to share. How many loaves do you have was the question. We have all been given loaves, gifts that we use and gifts that we share. The more we give, the more we receive qualitatively with graces and blessings. We also talked about love as a listening ministry, a ministry of attentiveness. And I felt that it was definitely a communal feeling that we had. I think that when people were asked, what are the large gifts that you feel you experienced? What are the graces that you experienced in CLC? Words such as love, trust, community, vocation, gratitude, and freedom were mentioned. We tried to look at our own individual story of grace, graces we experienced. And then we also had an opportunity to go through what I thought was one of the most powerful exercises we did in personal prayer, small group, and a larger session. We were asked to consider communal paralyses. How are we as members of CLC on a journey fraught with challenges, the disorder of sin, hamartia, missing the mark, how the disorder of sin impacts our global and local communities and manifests itself as paralyses. We're called to be the salt of the earth, a light to the world, but we experience paralyses that get in the way. They become a distraction in our seeking the Majas. We looked at these paralyses and identified them as they related to us personally and our communities. We were asked to present these to the Lord in prayer as untapped gift and hidden light. Among the paralyses that were mentioned were the following. There was a sense that there could be a self-centeredness, a closed thinking, a lack of unity, something called small groupism, lack of passion, immobility, elitism, lack of unity, self-reference, contemplative inactivity, divisiveness, pride, lack of prayerful openness. My small group of 6 people identified a problem of making things too complicated, which we kind of labeled as a form of elitism. Each of these represents a way of being stuck, and we know that part of what Ignatius tries to do in the spiritual exercises is to unstuck people, to get them unstuck. But we were not discouraged because we looked at these tendencies as natural occurrences in the incarnation process, and we saw them as an opportunity to integrate and to accept the interdependence with one another that is characteristic of our way of proceeding and the narrative that we're living out. Whoops. We went through the history, our graced history from the founding and into the Marian congregations to Christian Life Community. We had an opportunity to list on this timeline more recently what major events had done by way of encouraging us to go on, and I think that was a very, very interesting opportunity. We've ended up saying that we would walk humbly with Christ with intention and attention, to trust the process and keep it simple. It was pretty intense throughout, and we had an open day where we just had entertainment. We had sponsoring country, provide folk musicians and dancing and singing, and it was just really an awful lot of fun. We had an opportunity to dress in local national costumes, and that was quite a bit of fun. The gentleman dressed as Pharaoh is a high-level bank administrator, and I think he had an awful lot of fun. We also took an opportunity to go through an immersion experience in a barrio, Barrio San Miguel. There were opportunities to visit a social center, school. I personally wanted to meet with a family that had extended an invitation to the assembly delegates. I was a little apprehensive at first, feeling a little awkward about visiting, self-conscious about being an American, rich American tourist to this poor village. But when we were greeted by the young people, let me see if we've got a little, trying to get this to, that sort of dispelled any kind of awkwardness, whatever. We had an opportunity to eat tortas fritas, fried bread. We sipped the yerba mate tea, and we had a wonderful time. I did ask my host, the dad of the family that we met with, if I said I'd probably be asked to say something about our visit, and is there anything that you'd like to share with CLC friends and family in the United States? And Jorge was his name, without missing a beat, said, yes, please tell them that we all share the same spirit. The Spirit will guide us, and let's continue to pray for one another. I'm wondering now, I think I'm coming down to about 2 minutes left of my time, and this might be a good time for me to break. Lois, what do you think?
That's fine, Ed. We'll move to the panel and then you can talk about the other part of the assembly afterwards.
Will do.
So I'd like to introduce the panel. They are all people, they were asked to be on it because they're all people who have experienced at least one world meeting. Frank Huang is one of the delegates from this meeting in Buenos Aires. He was one of the other 4 people that represented CLC-USA. Carol Gonzalez was at this meeting representing North America. The world community tries to connect regions, and our North American region has been meeting for quite a while, and they asked Carol if she would represent the region. And Liam Lay was at the world meeting in Fatima 8, 9, 10 years ago, and has been a CLC-USA president. Carol is on the National Coordinating Council now and leads the Apostolic Advocacy and Action Group. And then Marie Schimmelfenning, who has been involved in CLC since the 50s or 60s for a long time, has been on the World Exco and has attended any number of world meetings. I'll invite them to speak in the order that I just introduced them. And then we'll move to a couple of minutes for people to just begin to surface their questions, and then we'll go back to Ed. So Frank?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Yeah, I'm Frank, and yes, I was at the World Assembly this past summer. First of all, thank you, Ed, for that wonderful presentation so far. It has really sparked memories in me, most of which, like you were saying, the World Assembly, that experience is so valuable, and it's just like really emphasizes that CLC really is one world body. A lot of times before I attended the assembly, I would always hear that, you know, CLC is a world body, it's a world community, and I believed it. But then when I actually had the opportunity and the privilege and the honor to experience it for myself, it was just amazing. I mean, there's more than 240 individuals there. We were all strangers at first, mostly, and more than 70 countries, nations. And by the end of it, we felt like a big family. Like we experienced something, and something that changed our lives, really. One of the first encounters when I realized how like amazing this was one of the first sharing groups I was a part of. And I remember each person of this 10-person sharing group, and it was just initial stages, had a different accent. It was amazing. There was one person had an Irish accent, one person had an Ethiopian, one person had a German, one person had a French accent. And it's just amazing. Something like I can only imagine in the movies. But this is real life, and this is me here with them. And even though we all spoke English rather well, even with different accents, what was amazing is that the common words that brought us together as CLC, like the words formation, of Ignatian spirituality, the exercises, those words, those key phrases, that was like that common language between all of us. And even though we all came from different nations and had various experiences, just the experience of CLC alone brought us together and helped us to have a common language and brought us closer together as one body, and helped us to immerse ourselves into what more it meant to be one body, being a gift for the church and for the world. So yeah, that was one of the defining moments that really sparked my experiences over in Buenos Aires this past summer.
Thank you, Frank. Carol?
It's wonderful to be in this conversation, and I'm so grateful for Ed and Frank's. I just affirm everything they have shared. When I try to, and well, one of the things I want to affirm is what especially mentioned, that Ed mentioned about the Harvest magazine, that if you haven't yet availed yourself, it's available online for anyone. The Harvest Volume 51, number 2. There are so many rich articles in there that that I'd encourage you to share within your local community, that build on the observations that have been shared this evening. In that, I mentioned, if we think about it in 3, like CLCs want to do, about our 3 stools, relationships in community called to deepen, This was so much experience, as both Ed and Frank have just mentioned, and Ignatian process that we're called to share. And third, to collaborate more effectively on mission as an apostolic community of love. And we ended this assembly with being called to go forth. And those three aspects, I think, were really experienced by the delegates. One of the symbolic memories I have was about, on the stage there were 3 empty chairs, and they represented the Trinity's presence with us as we tried to clarify, how is CLC gift to the world and to the church? And that symbol is a really powerful example of how we sought to come from these variety of 70+ countries and really listen to the same spirit. I was personally so grateful to have the opportunity, as Frank and Ed have shared, to have relationships that I had only known on Facebook or online, to be able to be together with people and deepen those friendships. And also encouraged that there were at least 8 presidents from around the world that were under the age of 35. And lots of delegates in their 20s and 30s. So when we think about us as a world movement, we can be encouraged that God is raising up the next generation of leaders. I may be out of time, so I'll just share one quick thing about one Sunday evening conversation. Was very life-giving. As we focused, people came from around the country to just simply talk about what apostolic works are happening in their various national communities. That was so life-giving, and we're trying to build on that to help us stay connected and help us share what the Lord is inviting each of our national communities to do. And so the opportunity to share that with one another, that particular Sunday evening conversation, was especially a grace time. So maybe that's it for now. We'll let the Q&A take us to next.
Thanks, Carol.
Yeah.
Thanks. Liam?
Good evening, everybody. Just one thing I would like to share, and Carol and Ed mentioned. When I went to Fatima, I think all of us, and I think everybody who happened to be at the World Assembly would be invited to look at CLC as a proposal of a full Christian way of life. So the body that gather at the World Assembly is meant to be a model for the rest of the community. So there are 4 things that happen at the World Assembly. And I think if you look closely, you will see these 4 things will resemble what we have in the national community and also in your local group. The first thing is this makeup. In the world community, is makeup over 200 people, practically strangers, never met one another in their life. Second, what is it and what it does? What is it is a governing body. It get together and actually was bestowed certain authority to make decisions for the community. And how does it do it? It does it by discernment, by going through a process. And this time in particular that Ed shared, that CLC actually invited a group of professional or processes to come in and help with this process. So there's 4 things: this makeup, what it is and what it does, the purpose of its gathering, which is to find God's will. And the 4th thing is how does it do it, the process. So what happened in the world community is man is a model, and this model is supposed to flow through to the national community, to the local community. So each local community look at this, okay, we gather, it's our makeup, what do? We govern our own body, which is a local group, and we are the governing body and discerning body at the same time. And we do it by processes, which is community discernment. And I think now is how does it do it? So in the work community, I invite somebody to come in and help. And now we are in the process of forming guides. And that is the 4 pieces that fall into this. So that's what I would like to share with everybody about.
Thank you, Liam. And Marie.
Hello. I don't know if I'm there or not. Well, it always gives me goosebumps when I'm listening to anybody who's been at the World Assembly, because it's certainly my heart and my mind that's always there when I can't be there, obviously. And I've had the opportunity of actually being part of 6 of them. The last 3 that I was on the World Exco. So I held the responsibility along with others to make sure that the assembly is going in the right direction and correctly. What I encourage, when Ed was speaking, and I really appreciated his input, is to really encourage us to look at the history. I saw the slide, and the person who was doing that was Maria Magdalena Palencia from Mexico. Maria and I shared being secretary at one time I was a secretary on World Expo, and then she did it. But I do encourage everybody to look at that. I think it's on the world. We're certainly going to be able to see that. But it would be good for us to also look, and I think that's what we're going to do, look at in our history too. I think the other thing that really was exciting for me to hear that there were 71 countries there. Back in my day, when I was way back, but not too much way back, I started CLC when I was in the 50s, and made my first World Assembly in 73. We had maybe 50 countries. So what was exciting to hear that there are 71 now is to know that we are growing on a worldwide level. And I think on perhaps on a deeper level than we have ever had before. I think it's wonderful for our delegates to have had that opportunity to be there and for them to be able to bring it home to us. I read from cover to cover the harvest that Carol mentioned, and I said, wow, it was just so enlightening to see where we are moving, and that we cannot be afraid to look at our paralysis and afraid to be able to pray over them. And I was really delighted to be able to hear that, because we do have a responsibility. We have a responsibility, I think, anytime we think about a World Assembly, we have a responsibility as members of a national assembly to make sure that we're moving on. So, and I think along with that, from what I heard from the panelists, especially those who were in Buenos Aires, is we come to this with a deep listening, and that's what we have to do in our national community. And so excited that we will be able to be together at our National Assembly this year. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. We're a little ahead of schedule, and I'm delighted about that because I want to have more time questions. So if you have a question now, if you would just go ahead and write it. In just a minute or two, I'm going to have Ed finish up his presentation. And then we'll have the rest of the time for questions and discussion. I'm sorry that the format does not allow people to name their questions live. What we'll need to do is to write them, and I will be directing the questions to the panelists. So if you have someone in mind for a question, just direct it to them. If it's open, then just give us the question. So let's take just a minute, let people reflect on what you've heard so far, and then Ed, I'll give you a signal to begin in just a minute. So Ed, if you want to begin.
Good. Okay, this is the Sunday evening sharing that Carol just mentioned. I thought it was really good. We had a variety of things, and there were people who maybe didn't have an opportunity to share at the larger assembly things that they're doing in their national communities. Poland, for example, was doing some interesting things during Lent and so forth, and there were a few others in Nairobi, and different African countries came forward, and I think that was just a wonderful opportunity. There were several groups like this that would meet in the evening. There also, some of the younger people would stay up, and there was some singing and so forth, just a lot of wholesome, good stuff that was going on, and we really appreciated that. We were talking about deepening and sharing and going forth, and I think that's the challenge, that there was this apostolic feeling, though I think that some people felt that there was a process, there was an awful lot of emphasis placed on the process, and we perhaps didn't have enough time to speak about specific ministries that we wanted to become involved in. As a CLC body, what are we called to today was the question that we prayed over, and spent quite a bit of time thinking about praying and individually sharing in our groups, and then sharing with the larger group. And that was the dynamic. We started with personal prayer. I guess I'm amazed at how much time was allotted for personal prayer. We even had one entire day of silence, and we were asked to respond to these questions. And this is kind of a collection of what the front runners were, and what we felt we are called to do today. We're called to deepen our CLC identity through an ongoing inner conversion that frees us to be ever more faithful to and intentional in living out our CLC charism in all its dimensions. We're called to share humbly with others the gift of Ignatian spirituality as lived out in our lay vocations. We view discernment and the tools that Ignatian spirituality provides as precious gifts to share with others, not to keep just for ourselves. We're called to go forth, to serve those most in need, and to sow the seeds of mercy, joy, hope, in a world that is volatile, complex, and polarized. What I did was I took Father Sosa, the Superior General of the Society of Jesus and the CLC World Ecclesial Assistant, out of sequence, putting him at the end because he was talking about some of the same kinds of issues, the gifts that we have to share, using prayer, discernment to wisely serve and be agents for reconciliation. But what was happening in the Society of Jesus at the time for the last couple of years was that they were also looking at universal apostolic preferences. And I include this in not so much because we talked about it at the assembly, though we talked with about all of these themes at the assembly, but you'll notice that the date on this, it's February 19th, 2019, that after 2 years of discernment by the Society of Jesus, they came upon preferences that they want to pursue for the next 10 years. And here they are, and I list them because these were things that were discussed at the assembly, and I think that they might be worth revisiting in our National Assembly and beyond. I think they're worth discussion, and I think they're worth pursuing. The discernment and the spiritual exercises. What the Jesuits are saying is that we want to help people find Jesus Christ and follow him. We get in touch with our deepest self, the space where God speaks to us through discernment. Discernment is not only necessary when serious problems have to be solved. It's an instrument of struggle to follow the Lord better day by day and hour by hour. That's a direct quote from the statement on the apostolic preferences. And it's a process. And when we talk about our way of proceeding, our vocation in CLC, this is what we're talking about. This becomes the foundation, helping people find Jesus Christ, but we can't do this unless we have a relationship with Jesus Christ. We walk with the excluded. We walk with the poor, the outcasts of the world, those whose dignity has been violated, in a mission of reconciliation and justice. This is what Father Sosa was talking about. We see the gap between the rich and the poor as it widens across the world, and we hear weekly reports of hundreds of people perishing as they try to reach a new home, political leaders who kindle hatred and build walls between rich and poor, young and old, those at home and those who have to migrate. The reality of children who have been abused physically or sexually is also painfully and personally present to us. Caring for our common home, work with gospel depth for the protection and renewal of God's creation. Creation today is crying out as it never has before, laboring to be set free, as Romans 8 tells us. Today's environmental crisis is impacting, in particular, the poor and the vulnerable. Action is needed by Christians and by all people of goodwill. Nations and peoples need an encouraging and an ecological conversion if we are to be honest custodians of this wonderful planet. The society says we can still change the course of history. And it echoes Laudate Si and so forth and so on. And finally, journeying with youth. Accompany young people in the creation of a hopeful future, reality. We walk with them in order to perceive and discern where the Spirit is leading our world and our church. I think it's worth thinking about because they articulate, the society, the Jesuits articulate a 10-year plan that I think is that resonates with a lot of the themes that were discussed and prayed over at the World Assembly. And that's why I included them. I was just really struck by that when I read the preferences, the apostolic preferences. So, you know, that might give us some food for thought this evening, and certainly as we move forward. And then I just wanted to wrap up. We did spend some time doing business. We had an evening session to explain the budget that we were going to vote upon the following day. And it was, I think, an interesting discussion, but the budget was approved without much fighting. There were a few amendments about language to be used in the general norms, and that wasn't accepted. And I know that several of our delegates, ones closest to us were Canadian, who felt that there were issues that they would have preferred to spend some time on that were kind of tabled because people had not prepared, and that's another story. But I think that there was an awful lot of emphasis placed on process. There was an awful lot of emphasis placed on focusing on the second leg of the three pillars, if you will. I'm mixing metaphors, but the fact that, as Father Borbley used to say, that a discerning community is, in fact, one of a mission of the Christian life community, and we need to pursue that. One other thing that struck me was that I spoke to a bunch of Europeans, and for them, CLC represents the community that they don't really experience in the Catholic Church in some of the European countries. Ireland, I was one of the members of my small group, felt that there's an emphasis on going to church, but when you finish with Sunday worship or worship on holy days of obligation, there really isn't the community that you can be part of and find support and refuge in. So I think that CLC represents that kind of an option for people who want to follow a way of proceeding that is very, very supportive and resonates with them. So we had elections, and what I found interesting was the conversations really focused on diversity, that we wanted geographic diversity. You'll notice that there are quite a few women. Anne-Marie was chosen vice president. Catherine was chosen secretary. Daphne was chosen a consultor. Nayat was also a consultor. So I think that there was an intention, an intentional leaning towards diversity, both geographic and certainly having more women involved. So I think that was encouraging. It's a pretty enlightened group of people, I thought, and I was very, very impressed. While the official languages of CLC are French, Spanish, and English, I was just quite amazed by how many people were bilingual, trilingual, and more. And I was pleased that there were quite a few people who spoke English as a first, second, or third language. And that also added to our experience, my experience as English-speaking people. So this is the Executive Council that I just listed. And it's a nice group of folks. And I think that kind of wraps up my my sharing, my reflections. What you see is a gourd of the mate tea that we were sipping. Some people kind of sip that from morning till night, and I think I will stop there and entertain questions.
Thank you, Ed. Thank you, Ed. There are a couple questions already up. Please feel free to add yours. And if you have a question that you just really, it's too complex or writing it is a problem, there is an option to raise your hand, and we'll be able to bring you on. I'd like to take the questions that are there first. Ann Deppner is asking, I'm guiding a relatively new group. What would be most important for them to know about the World CLC Assembly? And I'd like to open the questions, not just to Ed, but to anyone on the panel. What's most important for a new CLC to know about the World Assembly and World CLC? And who wants to speak? You can't all, but.
Well, I think several people can respond. I think that there are the three pillars of CLC. You start with that. A tripod certainly is very solid. And the three pillars that we talk about are Ignatian spirituality. It's a lay organization. We're communal and we focus on service. Ignatian spirituality.
Specifically about the world community, though.
Okay, and the emphasis that was placed on process and the personal prayer, going more deeply, lay calling, and service.
I'll follow up on that, Lois. Just that we are a world body. I think I'm echoing what Frank said, that just the fact that we make our commitment to the world community and we live that out at the local level. And that's a different orientation than I think many of us experience here in CLC-USA, where we're so grounded in our local community. But if we start with that real clear recognition, we're a world body, that's to whom we make our CLC permanent and temporary commitment, and we live that out locally. And the graced history aspect that Marie mentioned was so highlighted at each assembly. And I just wanted to echo what she said about there is on the CLC-USA website, all of the harvest issues, and in particular, the harvest volume 46, number 2, has the history around World Assemblies and the graces that have been unfolding these past 50 or 60 years. And also on the World CLC website, you can download many of the supplements, and the supplement number 69 is 450 years of Ignatian lay communities. It's just a little booklet, but it's so rich. And all of this is available online for these new community members.
Another thing I want to add, I kind of see CLC-USA as a microcosm of the world assembly. Even the world is 71 plus nations now. It's different on many different languages, but CLC-USA is what, 6 languages across different 6 languages, right? You have cultural groups and you have regional groups and everything. And it's amazing that to become one body, if the world can do it, why can't the US do it as well? To become one body and part of the one world. So I like to think the local groups start there. It starts from the grassroots, and then as you continue connecting to the one body, you start extending to the larger world.
Thank you. There was another question about just a kind of a process one about the small groups at the assembly. Someone was wondering if they're, I think it was Paula Bergen, whether they're all in English or how does that work? So
the way they did it was that they asked us what languages we speak, and they brought together people who have a common language, so that there were people who maybe spoke English as a third language or second, whatever, but generally people who spoke the same language they were pulled together. There were, as Frank mentioned, there were many different accents of English that we experienced, but every person in a group that was tagged with a specific color would speak the predominant language in that particular group. So that's how they did that. That was done in advance.
Yep. So there's another question that basically it's saying, realizing that CLC is primarily a Catholic group, does it have a Christian-based segment that accommodates non-Catholic communities that still are Ignatian and that still use Ignatian spirituality? And I can answer that, or Carol, you're nodding your head. Do you want to say a little bit about? Let me answer that. We have had non-Roman Catholic groups in CLC for a long time. There's a significant number of groups that are Anglican in England and Scotland, and there are groups that are Lutheran in Germany. In the United States and in Canada, we have groups that are other Christian denominations, or where there's a mix in a group. So that's been there for a long time. We haven't really addressed that question directly. I think Liam and I will both remember that in Fatima, that question came up. And Daniela Frank, who was the president at the time, asked us to just keep that, let the Spirit work. And keep it in prayer, and let's see where it emerges in our community. So I don't know if that answers the question, but that's my experience. And does anybody else on the panel want to say any more about that?
Just that for the European countries, several of whom are very ecumenical in their lived reality of CLC.
Other questions? We don't have any other on the list right now.
I
Go ahead.
I'm good. I just wanted to, Paula Bergen's question about language, there was simultaneous translation throughout too. So we had a group, I'm sorry I didn't mention that, but there was a team of translators and they were translating into French, into Spanish, and into English.
Yeah, okay, thank you, thank you. I have a question for anybody who'd like to ask. How were you impacted, or are you impacted by, as a US CLC person, by the experience of being at a World Assembly or working at the world level? And as that's one question, and a corollary to that question is, how would you help CLC people who have not had that experience get inside the experience of being a world community? So your thoughts on either of those questions?
I think that my experience of moving beyond my local group this goes back to when I first got involved with CLC 20 years ago or whatever. When I moved from the local group to, say, a regional group, and then eventually got to meet people at the national level, I think it's experiential that way, that you get a feel for this dynamic locally, but you realize that it's the same regionally and nationally, and then you meet an international body, or you meet people from the international body, and it's just such an expansive feeling. And the connectivity is remarkable. Again, you meet people from Africa, you meet people from Asia, and you move into a conversation that has depth and meaning very, very, very quickly. But and then you realize that you are connected. But I think it does require some experience of, and there are technological ways perhaps of doing it. But certainly for me, it was just an awesome experience to meet people from around the world, including Poland, and I speak Polish. So, and the values and the way of thinking and a way of proceeding and a perception of one's lay vocation in CLC, it just kind of knocks you for a loop. It's you realize, yes, we are indeed one.
Lois, in answer to your question, I experienced a confirmation of my CLC vocation by the experience of being at World Assembly, and with a deepened joy at what a graced community we are part of, and that graced history that Marie always lifts up for us, that we're in this long flow of people who have come around the call of Ignatian discernment to be on mission together. So that was really confirmed for me. And as just an illustration of the kinds of individual gifts that people tried to share, one of the delegates from Taiwan brought a beautiful symbol that she had hand calligraphied for every person at the assembly. Everyone received this, and on the back she put in English the meaning of this calligraphy, and mine was Magis. And so the sense of deepened relationship and love, that we are really an apostolic community of love, was the impact on my life.
This is Marie. I think what happened to me and the opportunity I had of attending those assemblies, that when I hear something on the news about a certain country, I immediately think, I wonder where our CLC group is in there. And, you know, of recent, the country of Syria, you know, we know that there are CLCs there, and we have made that our family, or a family that we helped to bring Canada, from Syria to Canada through Lebanon. It's just to be kind of more conscious of that than anything else, I believe.
Frank or Lee?
An impact on me is that just a sense of joy I saw in each of the nations, their proudness of being CLC. And it was really contagious to me. And what I wanted to also bring back more to home is that joy of CLC-USA, to be part of CLC-USA, and that we could do more to be united and be an apostolic community, one body. And then just amazing, I remember Carol mentioned earlier that there are people at the World Assembly younger than I am, and I thought I would be the youngest person. But there are people younger than me by even like 10 years almost. And it's just like CLC spans generations, and I feel like we can cultivate that here in our own nation too.
And we talked about some of the themes that were discussed, but the quality of the conversations that took place, especially the small groups, it wasn't just cerebral stuff. There was just an awful lot of emotion. There was much heart. There was much pain in some of. I mean, there were tears as well as laughter in the small groups. I just want, qualitatively speaking, it was the small groups were very, very, a very powerful experience for me, and some of that experience in the small group would be uncomfortable to share in the larger body, but I can tell you that it was visceral, it was authentic, it was genuine, and it was beautiful to behold.
Thank you. I think Adi Vieira, who is also at the Assembly as our president, wants to say something, and I think Carmen can put her on live. Adi, you're muted.
To talk anything. So,
good.
But I wanted to say something because I explode if I don't say how much I did in the World Assembly. And I, being a CVX, because remember, I'm also a CVX and CLC, and I had the best experience sharing my feelings and being accepted in the big group and small groups. Like a family in one body, the big group and a small, they are family. Please, everybody knows that we are a family, and that is a one body. And then I pray that that stay one body forever, deepen, share, and go forth. Yes, all I want in my life, and all I saw in the World Assembly, everything that I was saw in there, everything that I was experienced for the best time in my life, I had the best experience being a Christian, being a Catholic. So thank you just for sharing this, because I was wanting to say how much I love to be in the World Assembly. So thank you for sharing me.
Thank you. I understand Dominic Totoro, Father Dominic Totoro has a question. I don't see it written, so I'm thinking he wants to speak. Dominic, you're on. Just need to unmute you.
Mute. Okay. This is a question from Jim O'Brien. Can you, that is to say, Ed in the panel, say anything about our paralyses here in CLC-USA? This is especially in preparation for our National Assembly.
Thank you. So we didn't hear from Liam before. Liam, you want to start? Put you on the spot. I know you well enough to put you on the spot.
Well, I think in the aspect that we come there and we feel and actually experience the connection out of vocations, that is a tremendous experience. I think within the small group we have, we come in, sometimes we know one another and sometimes we don't, but it's a small group. So you don't feel that overwhelming experience at the beginning. But the World Assembly make that very distinctive about it. But I think in order for just Carol was saying that we live CLC in the local community. I think that is important to take what at the World Assembly and repeat it at the local community. And that is the essence of CLC, that we come together with many different things, with different ideas, but we come together as one body. Mm-hmm. And this one body come together to discern God's will foremost. Before we do anything, we need to discern God's will first. Even we discern how we do it. We discern what to do, then we discern how to do it, and we discern, or we call evaluation, how we have done it. So I think it's important to take the model at CLC and repeat it at the local communities. And that is how CLC will flow back and forth from the World Assembly down to the local communities and back and forth like that. And I think by doing that, we will actually experience the concept or living out the vision of being one body. Mm-hmm. Now the church is also, we all know the church is one body, but hardly ever anybody feel that way. If we go to church, we go to mass as a local parish, we may know somebody, but we don't know everybody. And sometimes we stand next to a person that we have never met before, and there'll be hesitation during sign of peace, especially that person is coughing or sneezing. So that idea, the vision of one body, is actually living out in concrete way in the world community. And then at the World Assembly and then the National Assembly, which we will have this summer. And then I think the idea is to replicate that vision at the World Assembly at the national level then. I think that's just like Father Totoro mentioned. And then we can bring it back to the local communities. Then we will know why we tried so hard to produce guides for the groups. That's the reason why. So that's my take.
I think in terms of a national community, if we look at sin as missing the mark, hamartia, then we look at sins of omission and commission, and I think that some of the paralyses may be omissions. We are maybe not striving enough for the magis. There are untapped gifts that we have. We have hidden lights that we're not sharing with others. We lack enthusiasm. I think Ignatius was always pushing us to get unstuck from habits and compulsions and addictions. But he wanted to have us strive for the more, the magis, and the paralyses might be minor. Maybe we're not energized enough. It's the rich young man in the gospel who, when Jesus says, "Go sell all that you have and come follow me." Some of us might be called to a greater degree of magis, and I think those are the paralyses. And if we don't have this open, it's the word I'm trying to find, magnanimous look at my role in creation, perhaps I'm not living up to my full potential, and these become little paralyses. We're not looking for the big sin, if you will, but we're looking for little paralyses that might feed our ego and really hurt the smaller community or the regional community that we find ourselves in. So we look at that, and I'd say untapped gifts and hidden lights.
I just want to add something if I may.
Yes.
I think in the National Assembly, in which we hope that many of us will gather in Pittsburgh this summer, there is this paralysis that is so common that we see every day that we're not bothered by it, and therefore we don't realize that it is paralysis. Yeah, when I first met Father Jim Barbley, he pointed to our name, Christian Life Community of CLC of USA, and he said that is wrong. And I looked at him with such wide eyes that I have no idea what he's talking about. And then he looked at me. I think he knows what he knew what I was wondering. I said, "You know, Liam, there's only one Christian Life Community. There's no such thing as the Christian Life Community of the USA. There's Christian Life Community in USA." And I think that is something that's so obvious that we don't pay attention. So, for example, we would have the Vietnamese community or the one CLC, then we have so and so. We have only one. We only have one CLC speaking Vietnamese primarily, or speaking English, or speaking Polish, or speaking Spanish, but we one CLC. And I think sometimes the paralysis is so obvious there for so long that we don't really see it. Unless we see it, we unfreeze it. It would be done. We cannot be one body if CLC is an adjective instead of a noun. It should be, you know, Vietnamese community or Polish CLC instead of CLC Vietnamese. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So if we look at these things, and this summer we have a chance to take a look back at who we are, how we are made up, and the diversity that we are, which is the richness instead of a barrier.
Yeah.
And then we can see that we are truly a body.
Yeah. Yeah. Liam, I just want to reinforce that. I think in the question that I asked before about people who have not had the experience of the world community, come to the National Assembly. That coming to the National Assembly gets close to having that experience of being one CLC, especially since we've got so much diversity and culture and language. We just got so much richness in our own country. So there was a question about this being available on the website, and it will be. And we're going to make an effort to get it up as quickly as possible so that you can share it with your communities or encourage others in your cluster or region to see it. There were no other questions that I saw unless I'm missing one. No, I don't see any others. I want to do two things. I want to do the evaluation that we always do. And so what I'm asking you to do is take a moment, get quiet, think about this past hour and 15 minutes, and see what word or phrase, please not a sentence, because we have to read them, not a paragraph, a word or a phrase that captures some of what you're taking from this or what you're experiencing out of this. And I want you to put it in the chat session. So if you should have mine's orange, I don't know if yours is orange, but there's a chat and you can just type right into that and then everyone will be able to see everyone's words. So let's take a minute in silence and then we will have people add their words to the chat session. And again, it's a way of saying, this has been the grace for me in this time. Just another 2 minutes, and then Claire, we'll just close out with some announcements. So there were some that were only sent to panelists, and let me read those. A comment from Paula Bergen that the Jesuit preferences are parallel to our own, and actually what a gift of grace that is. Diversity is our grace. Diverse experiences equals richness. Enlightening. One community, one body. Kudos to Ed. Live locally, world discernment. A desire to share with all CLC-USA communities. And someone who just wrote the one word core, C-O-R-E, core. Struggling to be a community of love. That's it. Those are the ones you might not have seen. Paul, go ahead and share the webpage on the National Assembly. In terms of these, we will be doing another, I think we're going to be doing another guide Zoom and another webinar before the World Meeting, otherwise right after it. If you're a guide, please remember that we're asking you to not only come, but plan to get a late flight out so that we can have about 2 hours in the early afternoon for people to, for us to connect with each other as guides. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Carol, who is going to close us with prayer. Carol? You're on mute.
Prayer, just to follow up from that screen that was just shown, make sure that we're just a warm invite encouraging us all to be together July 18th to 21st at Duquesne University. CLC cluster here in Pittsburgh is eager to welcome all CLC from around the country. And a meeting format will be coming soon that will help our local communities to be able to pray as we prepare together for this National Assembly. So be looking for that. It will be a significant formation experience, as we've been talking about during this whole conversation, as we deepen our communal processes together. So, and just to encourage, there will be all of this information forthcoming on the CLC-USA website. And much of the material that we've talked about this evening is also available there and at the CVX CLC World site.
Yeah. Just a reminder, registration will be up in a week or so. It's not quite up yet. Carol?
Yeah, so I just encourage us to take a breath as we rest in this gratitude for the conversation together and Then I'll voice a prayer for us. Creator God, as we journey together, desiring greater depth, integration, and joy in the living out of our CLC charism in the world, we find ourselves amid volatile, polarizing times. We seek, Jesus, to place ourselves in the hands of the Holy Spirit, full of hope that we can together seek your way towards the future we only see dimly. Empower us, Lord, with inner conversion, with a humble confidence of knowing who we are in Christ Jesus, and as one world, lay, Ignatian community with a graced history. Enable us to be a prophetic, discerning family as contemplative companions on mission adventure with the poor in humble apostolic visibility. Enliven us to a ministry of reconciliation, of caring for your creation as a leaven of hope, co-laboring with your Christ project in the world. We hear your call, Father, to deepen, to share, and go forth. And we seek, Lord, to listen ever more attentively together, to be available for that call. Amen.
Amen. Thank you all. Thank you all for your time. Thank the panelists, Ed, for stepping in for Anne-Marie. I'd ask you to keep Anne-Marie Brennan in your prayers. She's in the midst of chemo for breast cancer and actually had a chemo treatment today. So she wasn't able to join us. She's just very, very tired. So keep her and all the people in our community who are ill in your prayer. And we are finished. Thank you for your time. See you all again soon.